The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal palace of Zephyria as Princess Kara Vexandra stood on her balcony, watching another failed suitor limp away from the arena. The Corvan warrior had lasted longer than most, nearly completing the first trial before his arrogance got the better of him. Like all the others, he had underestimated what the trials truly required. Kara's skin shifted from its usual silver to a deep purple, reflecting her growing frustration. For 10 years, suitors had come from across the galaxy seeking her hand in marriage. They arrived with grand speeches about their wealth, their strength, their intelligence. They boasted of conquering worlds, commanding fleets, and solving impossible puzzles, yet none of them had ever truly seen her as anything more than a prize to be won. The Zephyrian princess was not like other royal daughters. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with crystalline skin that changed colors with her emotions, she commanded respect through her own achievements. She had earned her position as heir to the throne by proving herself in battle, in the council chambers, and in the minds of her people. She was not a decoration to be claimed by the strongest bidder. Her father, Emperor Then Vexandra, entered the balcony behind her. His massive frame cast an even longer shadow, and his skin glowed with the steady gold of parental concern. "Another one leaves defeated," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider these trials, my daughter." Kara turned to face him, her amber eyes flashing with determination. "The trials stay, father. They serve their purpose." "And what purpose is that? To remain unmarried forever?" Emperor Thane moved to stand beside her, looking out at the retreating figure in the distance. "The nobles whisper that you make the challenges impossible on purpose." "The nobles whisper many things," Kara replied. "Most of them are fools who would sell their daughters to the highest bidder. I will not be sold." The emperor sighed, a sound like wind through crystal caves. "I do not wish to sell you, child. But our people need strong alliances. The galaxy grows more dangerous each day. New species emerge from the outer systems, and not all of them come in peace." Kara's skin shifted to a cool blue, the color of deep thought. She had heard the reports from the border worlds. Strange ships had been spotted in the void between star systems. Some carried beings that looked almost familiar, while others defied all understanding. The galaxy was changing, and Zephyria needed to adapt or risk being left behind. "Then let them prove they are worthy allies," she said finally. "Let them show they understand what strength really means. Your trials test more than strength, Kara. You know this." "Yes, they do." She turned back to the view of her capital city, where millions of Zephyrians went about their daily lives. They test wisdom, courage, and character. They test whether a being can see beyond their own desires to understand what truly matters. The emperor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And what if no one ever passes them?" "Then I will rule alone, as I have always been prepared to do." Far across the galaxy on a small blue-green world called Earth, Lieutenant Jake Morrison was having a very different kind of morning. He sat in a cramped briefing room aboard the orbital station Luna Base, listening to Ambassador Linda Carter explain their upcoming mission to a planet he had never heard of. "Zephyria is one of the major powers in this sector," the ambassador was saying, her voice crisp and professional. "They control 17 star systems and have one of the most powerful fleets in known space. Establishing good relations with them could be crucial for humanity's future in the galactic community." Jake shifted in his chair, trying to get comfortable in the standard-issue uniform that never seemed to fit quite right. At 32, he had spent most of his adult life in space, first as a Marine and then as part of the exploration corps. He had seen things that would give most people nightmares, fought battles on worlds with names he could barely pronounce, and somehow managed to survive first contact with 6 different alien species. "What's our role in this?" asked Dr. Peter Brooks, the team's cultural specialist. He was a thin man with nervous eyes who always seemed to be taking notes about everything. "We're there to observe and learn," Ambassador Carter replied. "The Zephyrians have agreed to meet with us, but they're not particularly impressed by humanity. So far, most of the major powers see us as primitive newcomers who got lucky with faster-than-light travel." Are they wrong? Jake asked, earning a sharp look from the ambassador. That remains to be seen, Lieutenant. Our job is to prove that humanity has something valuable to offer the galactic community. Susan Walsh, their trade negotiator, looked up from her tablet. What kind of culture are we dealing with? What should we expect? Warrior society, Dr. Brooks answered before the ambassador could speak. They value strength, honor, and personal achievement. Their emperor has ruled for over 300 years, and his daughter is set to inherit the throne. She's unusual. Unusual how? Jake asked. She's never married. In Zephyrian culture, royal marriages are typically arranged through trials of combat or contests of skill. Princess Kara has designed her own trials, and no one has ever passed them. Ambassador. Carter nodded, which is why we need to be very careful. The Zephyrians respect strength, but they also have a complex understanding of what strength means. We can't just show up and expect them to be impressed by our technology or our military achievements. What do they want from us? Susan asked. Trade opportunities, mostly. They're interested in some of our manufacturing techniques and our agricultural methods, but they're also curious about us as a species. We're one of the few races that has managed to survive first contact with multiple hostile alien groups. Jake remembered those encounters all too well. The Void Hunters had nearly wiped out humanity's first colony ship. The Hive Collective had tried to assimilate Earth's orbital defenses. Each time, humanity had survived not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through stubbornness, adaptability, and sheer refusal to give up. When do we leave? He asked. Tomorrow morning. The journey will take about 2 weeks through hyperspace. After the briefing, Jake found himself walking through the observation deck of Luna Base, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a world full of beings who stood 8 feet tall and could change the color of their skin. A world ruled by a princess who had spent 10 years defeating every suitor who challenged her. He wondered what kind of person would design trials that no one could pass. Was she truly impossible to please, or was she looking for something that no one had thought to offer? In his experience, the most difficult challenges often had the simplest solutions. Sometimes the key was not to try to win, but to understand what victory really meant. 2 weeks later, the human diplomatic ship Horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system. Jake stood on the bridge with the rest of the team, watching as their destination grew larger on the viewscreen. Zephyria was a beautiful world, with purple oceans and silver continents that gleamed like metal in the light of its twin suns. Impressive, Dr. Brooks murmured, making notes on his tablet. The capital city appears to be built entirely from crystalline structures. Those spires must be over a mile high. They're showing off, Ambassador Carter observed. This is their way of demonstrating their technological and architectural capabilities. Jake said nothing, but he was thinking about the briefing materials he had studied during the journey. The Zephyrians were indeed a warrior culture, but they were also builders, artists, and philosophers. Their concept of strength encompassed not just physical power, but mental discipline, emotional control, and spiritual understanding. As their ship approached the planet's surface, Jake felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came before entering unknown territory. In a few hours, he would be standing in the presence of beings who could kill him with their bare hands. In a culture where respect was earned through action rather than words, he had no idea that within days, he would be facing challenges designed to test the very limits of what it meant to be human. He had no idea that a princess who had defeated hundreds of suitors was about to meet someone who would change her understanding of what it meant to be strong. The Horizon descended toward the crystal spires of Zephyria, carrying its cargo of hopeful diplomats into a world where nothing would go according to plan. The human diplomatic team stepped off their transport ship and into a world that defied every expectation Jake had formed during the journey. The spaceport of Zephyria stretched for miles in every direction, its crystalline structures rising like frozen waterfalls toward the purple sky. Beings of incredible height and beauty moved through the crowds, their skin shifting through colors that had no names in any human language. Jake walked beside Ambassador Carter, Trying not to stare at the Zephyrians around them, each one stood, at least 2 feet taller than any human, with bodies that seemed carved from living crystal. Their movements were graceful and purposeful, like dancers who had been practicing the same routine for centuries. "Stay close and follow my lead," Ambassador Carter whispered to the team. "Remember, we're here to observe and learn, not to judge." Dr. Brooks was already scribbling notes on his tablet, his eyes wide with fascination. The architectural principles alone are revolutionary. Those support structures shouldn't be able to hold that much weight, but somehow they do. "Focus on the people, not the buildings," Susan Walsh reminded him. "We need to understand their culture if we want to establish meaningful trade relationships." A group of Zephyrian officials approached them, led by a being whose skin glowed with the steady gold of authority. He was even taller than the others, with intricate patterns carved into his crystalline flesh that marked him as someone of high rank. "Welcome to Zephyria," he said in perfect English, his voice carrying harmonics that made Jake's bones vibrate. "I am Commander Vex Thane, liaison to the Imperial Court. Emperor Thane awaits your arrival." The journey to the palace took them through the heart of the capital city, where millions of Zephyrians went about their daily lives. Jake saw markets where beings traded goods that seemed to glow with their own inner light, parks where children played games that involved manipulating the very air around them, and libraries where scholars studied texts that appeared to be written in light itself. "Your people are remarkable," Ambassador Carter said to Commander Vex Thane as they rode through the streets in a vehicle that seemed to float rather than roll. "We are ancient," the commander replied. "Our civilization has endured for over 10,000 years. We have seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and become extinct. We have learned to value permanence over change." "Yet you agreed to meet with us," Dr. Brooks observed. "A species that has been in space for less than a century." Commander Vex Thane's skin shifted to a pale blue, which Jake had learned was the color of mild amusement. "You intrigue us, humans. You survive situations that would destroy most species. You adapt to environments that should kill you. You form bonds with beings completely unlike yourselves. These are rare qualities in the galaxy." The palace rose before them like a mountain made of crystal and light. Its spires reached toward the clouds, and its walls seemed to pulse with their own inner energy. Jake had seen impressive architecture before, but nothing that compared to this display of power and beauty combined. Inside the palace, they were led through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were lined with portraits of past emperors and empresses, each one more imposing than the last. Jake noticed that many of the portraits showed rulers standing beside beings of other species, suggesting that the Zephyrians had a long history of diplomatic relationships. The throne room was vast enough to hold a small city. The ceiling disappeared into shadows high above, and the floor was made of polished crystal that reflected their images like still water. At the far end of the room, Emperor Thane sat on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single enormous gemstone. Jake had seen powerful beings before, but the Emperor commanded attention in a way that went beyond mere size or authority. His skin glowed with the deep gold of ancient wisdom, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire chamber without seeming to rise above a whisper. "Humans," he said, the word carrying both curiosity and judgment, "you have traveled far to reach our world. What do you seek from the Zephyrian Empire?" Ambassador Carter stepped forward and bowed in the manner Dr. Brooks had taught them. "Your Majesty, we come seeking friendship and mutual understanding between our peoples. Humanity is young in the galactic community, and we hope to learn from civilizations such as yours." "Friendship," the Emperor repeated as if tasting the word. "An interesting concept. In the galaxy, most relationships are based on power, fear, or mutual benefit. Friendship requires something more." "It requires trust," Jake said, surprising himself by speaking. Ambassador Carter shot him a warning look, but the Emperor's attention was already focused on him. "You are a soldier," Emperor Thane observed. "I can see it in the way you stand, the way you watch the room for threats." What is your name? Lieutenant Jake Morrison, Your Majesty. I'm here to ensure the safety of our diplomatic team. And what do you think of our world, Lieutenant Morrison? Jake considered his answer carefully. It's beautiful, Your Majesty. But beauty can be dangerous if you don't understand it. I'm still learning what your people value and what they consider important. The Emperor's skin shifted to a brighter gold, and Jake thought he saw approval in those ancient eyes. A wise answer. Too many visitors to our world see only the surface, and think they understand everything. Speaking of understanding, a new voice said from the side of the throne room, perhaps our guests would be interested in witnessing a demonstration of Zephyrian tradition. Jake turned to see a figure approaching from the shadows and felt his breath catch in his throat. Princess Kara Vexandra was even more impressive in person than in the briefing materials. She stood nearly 7 feet tall with skin that shifted between silver and gold like liquid metal. Her eyes were the color of molten amber, and when she looked at Jake, he felt as if she could see straight through him. My daughter, Emperor Thane said with obvious pride. Princess Kara has been eager to meet our human visitors. Indeed, the princess said, her voice carrying the same harmonic quality as her father's, but with an added note of challenge. I have heard much about humanity's reputation for surviving impossible situations. Today, you will have the opportunity to witness how we Zephyrians test the mettle of those who seek to prove themselves. Commander Vexthane stepped forward. Your Highness, we have prepared the arena for Lord Brutus Ironhide's attempt at the trials. Yes, Princess Kara said, her skin shifting to a deeper gold. The Corvan general who claims to have conquered 17 worlds single-handedly. He should provide interesting entertainment. Jake had read about the Corvans in the briefing materials. They were a species of warriors who stood even taller than the Zephyrians, with skin like stone and strength that could crush steel. If this Brutus Ironhide was having trouble with the princess's trials, then the challenges must be truly formidable. What exactly are these trials? Dr. Brooks asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his diplomatic training. Princess Kara's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. 3 challenges that test the qualities most valued by our people. The trial of strength, the trial of wisdom, and the trial of heart. They are designed to reveal the true nature of the challenger. And no one has ever passed them? Susan Walsh asked. No one, the princess confirmed, though many have tried. Corvan warriors, ethereal scholars, Centauri merchants, Nexus champions enhanced with the finest cybernetic implants. All have failed. Ambassador Carter looked uncomfortable. We would be honored to witness these trials, Your Highness, but we should clarify that we are here on a diplomatic mission, not to participate in contests of strength. Of course, Princess Kara said, but Jake noticed that her gaze lingered on him, though I wonder if humanity's reputation for adaptability is truly deserved, or merely the result of fortunate circumstances. The comment stung, and Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had seen too many friends die proving humanity's worth to let it pass without response. Your Highness, I've found that reputation is usually earned through action, not words. The princess's skin shifted to a bright blue, the color of surprise. Emperor Thane leaned forward on his throne, suddenly very interested in the conversation. The entire court seemed to hold its breath. An interesting perspective, Lieutenant Morrison, Princess Kara said slowly. Perhaps you would care to elaborate on that philosophy. Jake realized he had just stepped into something much bigger than a simple diplomatic exchange. The princess was testing him, just as she tested her suitors. The difference was that he had no intention of trying to win her hand in marriage. He was simply a soldier trying to do his job and represent his species with honor. I believe that. Actions speak louder than words, Your Highness. Anyone can claim to be strong, wise, or brave. But when the moment comes to prove it, only some people can deliver. And you believe humans can deliver? I believe humans try, Your Highness. We don't give up easily. Princess Kara studied him for a long moment, her skin cycling through several colors Jake didn't recognize. Finally, she smiled, revealing teeth that sparkled like diamonds. Then perhaps, Lieutenant Morrison, you will find our trials more interesting than you expect. Before Jake could ask what she meant, a commotion erupted from the arena entrance. Lord Brutus Ironhide had arrived. The Crimson Arena was the largest structure Jake had ever seen. Carved from red crystal that seemed to glow with its own inner fire, it could hold nearly 1,000,000 spectators. The roar of the crowd was deafening as they cheered for the upcoming trial. Jake sat in the royal viewing box with the other humans, watching as Lord Brutus Ironhide prepared for his challenge. The Corvan general was an impressive sight. His stone-like skin had been polished until it gleamed, and his massive frame was decorated with battle scars that told the story of countless victories. He carried weapons that looked like they could cut through starship hulls, and his confidence filled the arena like a physical presence. "He looks strong enough to win," Dr. Brooks whispered to Jake, his voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "Looks can be deceiving," Jake replied, remembering his military training. "The biggest guy in the room isn't always the most dangerous." Princess Kara stood at the center of the royal box, her skin shifting to a deep red that matched the arena. "Walls." She raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent so quickly that Jake's ears rang from the sudden quiet. "Lord Brutus Ironhide of the Corvan Empire," her voice carried across the arena without amplification. "You have come seeking to prove your worth through the trial of strength. Do you accept the challenge, knowing that failure means disgrace and possible death?" The general's laughter boomed across the arena. "I have conquered 17 worlds. Princess, I have broken the backs of star dragons and crushed the armies of the Void Hunters. Your trial holds no fear for me." "Then begin." The arena floor began to change. What had looked like solid crystal started to shift and move, forming walls, platforms, and obstacles that seemed to dance in the air. Jake watched in fascination as the space transformed into something that looked like a three-dimensional maze that existed in constant motion. "What is he supposed to do?" Susan Walsh asked, leaning forward in her seat. "Reach the center," Princess Kara answered without taking her eyes off the arena. "The trial will test not just strength, but adaptability, intelligence, and persistence. The challenge grows more difficult as time passes." Lord Brutus stepped into the maze with the confidence of someone who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with brute force. He immediately began smashing through the crystal walls, his massive fists shattering obstacles that would have stopped most beings. At first, his approach seemed to work. The crowd cheered as he bulldozed his way through the first section of the maze, leaving a trail of broken crystal in his wake. But as he progressed deeper, the maze began to respond to his tactics. The walls grew thicker, the obstacles more complex, and the path more treacherous. "He's making it harder for himself," Jake observed, watching as the general's destructive approach triggered more challenging defenses. "How so?" Ambassador Carter asked. "The maze is learning from his actions. Every time he breaks something, it builds back stronger. He's training his own opponent." Princess Kara glanced at Jake, her amber eyes showing a flicker of interest. "An astute observation, Lieutenant. What would you do differently?" The question caught Jake off guard. He studied the arena, watching as Lord Brutus became increasingly frustrated with obstacles that seemed to multiply faster than he could destroy them. "I'd stop fighting the maze and start working with it. Find out what it wants me to do instead of forcing my way through. And if it wanted you to fail? Then I'd find out why and change the rules." The princess's skin shifted to a bright blue. But before she could respond, a thunderous crash echoed through the arena. Lord Brutus had reached a section where the walls were too thick to break and the ceiling too high to climb. He was trapped in a crystal prison of his own making, his rage making the situation worse with every passing moment. "The trial is over," Princess Kara announced. "Lord Brutus Ironhide has failed the trial of strength." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered, others seemed disappointed, and a few appeared unsurprised. Jake noticed that many of the Zephyrians in the audience were watching the royal box instead of the arena, their attention focused on the human guests. "Another failure," Emperor Thane said, his voice carrying a note of sadness. "Perhaps my daughter's trials are indeed too difficult." "Or perhaps," Princess Cara replied. "The challengers are approaching them incorrectly." Lord Brutus was escorted from the arena, his humiliation complete. As he passed the royal box, he glared at the human delegation with undisguised hatred. Jake recognized the look. It was the expression of someone who needed to blame others for his own failures. "Your trial was unfair," the general snarled at Princess Cara. "No honorable challenge should change its rules during the contest." "The rules never changed," the princess replied calmly. "The challenge was always to reach the center. You chose to make it more difficult than necessary. A warrior fights with strength, not tricks." "A warrior fights with whatever tools are available, including intelligence." Lord Brutus's face turned. "Darker, if that was possible for someone with stone-colored skin." Easy words from someone who has never faced a real battle. "Perhaps if you fought your own trials instead of watching from safety, you would understand what true strength means." The insult hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Jake felt his muscles tense, ready to defend the princess's honor even though he barely knew her. But Princess Cara merely smiled, and her skin shifted to a color Jake had never seen before, a deep, dangerous red that seemed to pulse with inner fire. "You question my courage, Lord Brutus?" she said, her voice carrying a threat that made the arena walls vibrate. "You suggest that I am weak?" "I suggest that you are untested," the general replied, apparently too angry to realize how much danger he was in. "Any coward can design impossible challenges. It takes real strength to face them." What happened next occurred so quickly that Jake almost missed it. Princess Cara moved from the royal box to the arena floor in a single leap that covered nearly 100 feet. She landed in front of Lord Brutus like a falling star, her skin now blazing with colors that hurt to look at directly. "Then let us test your theory," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystal walls sing. "Face me in single combat, here and now. No weapons, no armor, no tricks. Just strength against strength." Lord Brutus grinned, showing teeth like broken rocks. Finally, a real challenge. The fight lasted exactly 37 seconds. Jake counted, unable to look away from the display of controlled violence. Princess Cara moved like liquid lightning, her crystalline skin deflecting the general's attacks while her own strikes found their targets with surgical precision. When it was over, Lord Brutus lay unconscious on the arena floor, and the princess stood over him without even breathing hard. The crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the arena. Princess Cara had just done something that would be talked about for generations. She had personally defeated a challenger who had questioned her strength. "That," Dr. Brooks whispered, "was incredible." "That was terrifying," Susan Walsh corrected. "She could have killed him without breaking a sweat." Jake said nothing, but his respect for the princess had just increased dramatically. She hadn't just defeated the general, she had done it with a level of skill and control that spoke of years of training and natural talent that went far beyond what most beings could achieve. Princess Cara returned to the royal box in another impossible leap, her skin now a calm silver that suggested the display of violence had been as easy as breathing. She took her place beside her father as if nothing had happened, but Jake noticed that her eyes kept returning to the human delegation. "Impressive," Ambassador Carter said diplomatically. "Your Highness is clearly skilled in combat." "Combat is only one aspect of strength," the princess replied. "The trials test much more than the ability to fight." "What do they test?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. "The ability to adapt, to learn, to grow beyond one's limitations. The willingness to try new approaches when old ones fail. The wisdom to know when to fight and when to find another way." Emperor Thane leaned forward on his throne. "Perhaps our human guests would be interested in a more detailed demonstration of the trials." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in the Emperor's tone that suggested this was not a casual invitation. "Father," Princess Cara said, her skin shifting to a warning yellow, "our guests are here for diplomatic purposes." "Not entertainment, of course," the Emperor agreed, "though I confess myself curious about humanity's famous adaptability. We have heard stories of your species surviving situations that would destroy most others. Stories can be exaggerated. Ambassador Carter said carefully. Indeed they can, Princess Kara said, but her gaze was fixed on Jake. Though sometimes they can also be underestimated. The tension in the royal box was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake realized that somehow, without intending to, he had become the focus of a test that went far beyond simple diplomatic relations. The princess was curious about him, the emperor was evaluating humanity's potential, and the entire court was watching to see what would happen next. Your Highness, Jake said slowly, if you're asking whether I would be willing to attempt your trials, the answer is no. I'm not here to seek your hand in marriage. And if I were to suggest that the trials could serve another purpose? Princess Kara asked. The decision had been made. Jake Morrison would attempt the trials of Princess Kara of Exandra, not as a suitor seeking marriage, but as a representative of humanity seeking to prove their worth to the galaxy. The news spread through the crystal palace like wildfire, and within hours, beings from across the empire had begun arriving to witness the spectacle. Jake stood in the preparation chamber, staring at his reflection in the polished crystal walls. He had faced death before, but never with so many eyes watching, never with the reputation of his entire species hanging in the balance. Ambassador Carter had tried to talk him out of it. Dr. Brooks had spent hours explaining the cultural significance of what he was about to attempt, and Susan Walsh had calculated the political consequences if he failed. None of that mattered now. The trials would begin at dawn, and Jake would either succeed or join the long list of failures that decorated the princess's history. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. Jake turned to see Princess Kara herself standing in the doorway, her skin a neutral silver that gave no hint of her thoughts. Your Highness, Jake said, offering the slight bow that Dr. Brooks had taught him. I didn't expect to see you before the trials. I wanted to speak with you privately, she said, stepping into the chamber, to ensure you understand what you are about to face. I understand that I'm probably going to fail spectacularly and embarrass my entire species in front of the galaxy. Princess Kara's skin shifted to a pale blue, the color of mild amusement. Your honesty is refreshing. Most challengers come to me full of confidence and boasting. They speak of their great achievements and their certainty of victory. I'm not most challengers, Your Highness. I'm just a soldier who said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Or perhaps the right thing at the right time, she said, moving to stand beside him at the crystal window that looked out over the capital city. Tell me, Lieutenant Morrison, what do you think strength means? Jake considered the question carefully. I used to think it meant being able to fight, to overcome obstacles through force or determination. But I've learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you don't know something, or ask for help, or choose not to fight at all. And wisdom? Knowing the difference between what you can change and what you can't. Understanding that being right isn't always the same as being helpful. Princess Kara's skin shifted to a deeper blue, and Jake thought he saw approval in her amber eyes. And what about courage? Courage isn't the absence of fear, Jake replied. It's being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. It's about protecting the people who depend on you, even when the odds are impossible. Interesting definitions, the princess said. Very different from what most challengers would say. Most challengers are probably better than me at everything. That matters, perhaps. Or perhaps they simply have different priorities. She turned to face him directly. The trials will test these qualities, Lieutenant Morrison. But they will also test something else, your ability to see beyond the obvious, to understand what is truly being asked of you. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? I mean that the trials are not what they appear to be. They are not designed to test physical strength, mental capacity, or emotional fortitude, though they will certainly challenge all three. They are designed to test something far more rare, the ability to understand another person's needs and respond to them honestly. I don't understand. Princess Kara's skin shifted to a warm gold, and for the first time since he had met her, Jake saw vulnerability in her expression. For 10 years, challengers have come to these trials seeking to win me like a prize. They see the tests as obstacles to overcome, enemies to defeat, puzzles to solve. None of them have ever asked the most important question, which is, what do I need from a partner? What am I truly looking for in someone who would stand beside me as I rule an empire? She paused, her skin cycling through several colors Jake didn't recognize. The trials are not about proving you are worthy of me, Lieutenant Morrison. They are about proving you can see me as a person, not just a princess. Jake felt his understanding shift like tectonic plates rearranging themselves. You're not looking for someone to conquer the challenges. You're looking for someone who understands why the challenges exist. Now you begin to comprehend the true nature of the trials. But I'm not here to court you, Your Highness. I'm here to represent humanity. I know, she said softly, which is why you may be the first challenger to succeed. You have no agenda. Beyond proving your people's worth, you are not trying to win me, you are trying to understand me. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Vex Thane, who announced that the arena was ready for the first trial, Princess Kara's skin returned to its neutral silver, and the moment of vulnerability Jake had glimpsed was gone. Remember what I have told you, she said as she prepared to leave. The trials will show you what you need to see, if you are willing to look beyond the obvious. The Crimson Arena was packed even fuller than it had been for Lord Brutus's attempt. Jake estimated that over 1 million beings had gathered to watch the human face the princess's trials. The noise was deafening, a mixture of cheers, jeers, and alien sounds that had no human equivalent. Jake stood at the entrance to the arena, wearing the simple combat uniform that regulations required. He had no weapons, no armor, no technological advantages. All he had was his training, his experience, and the princess's cryptic advice about seeing beyond the obvious. The trial of strength begins now, Princess Kara announced from the royal box. Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth will face the same challenge that has defeated hundreds of challengers before him. The arena floor began to change, transforming into the shifting maze that had trapped Lord Brutus. But as Jake watched, he noticed something that the general had missed. The maze wasn't random. It was responding to the challengers' actions, creating obstacles that matched their approach to the problem. Jake stepped into the maze and immediately stopped. Instead of charging forward like every other challenger, he stood still and observed. The walls around him pulsed with soft light, and he could feel a subtle vibration in the crystal floor beneath his feet. The maze is alive, he said to himself, remembering the princess's words about understanding what was truly being asked. It's not trying to stop me, it's trying to communicate with me. He placed his hand on the nearest wall and felt the vibration change. The wall responded to his touch, its color shifting from red to blue to green. Jake realized that the maze was designed to test not just strength, but the ability to work with an alien intelligence rather than against it. Instead of fighting the maze, Jake began to dance with it. He moved slowly and deliberately, feeling for the rhythm of the crystal walls, learning the language of light and vibration that the arena spoke. When a wall blocked his path, he didn't try to break through it, he asked it to move by touching it gently and waiting for it to respond. The crowd grew quieter as they watched something unprecedented. Jake was not conquering the maze, he was befriending it. The walls began to part before him, creating a path that seemed to flow like water toward the center of the arena. When he reached the center, the maze dissolved around him, leaving him standing in a circle of pure white light. The arena erupted in cheers, but Jake barely heard them. He was thinking about what the princess had said, about the trials testing the ability to understand another person's needs. The first trial is complete, Princess Kara announced. Lieutenant Morrison has passed the trial of strength. But Jake knew that the real test had nothing to do with physical strength. It was about the strength to listen, to adapt, to work with others instead of against them. The maze had been a metaphor for relationships, for the delicate dance of understanding that existed between any two beings trying to connect. The second trial would take place in the Library of Echoes, where Jake would face the paradox of the infinite mirror. As he was escorted from the arena, he caught sight of Princess Kara's face in the royal box. Her skin was glowing with colors he had never seen before, and her expression was one of wonder and something that might have been hope. Jake realized that he was not just representing humanity in these trials. He was also representing the possibility that someone, somewhere, might finally understand what the princes had been looking for all these years. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. The trial of wisdom awaited, and with it, the next step in a journey that would either end in glorious success or spectacular failure. But for the first time since arriving on Zephyria, Jake felt like he might actually have a chance. The key was not to try to win the trials, but to understand them. And slowly, piece by piece, he was beginning to see the pattern behind the princesses. Impossible challenges, the real test was just beginning. The Library of Echoes was unlike any place Jake had ever seen. Massive crystal shelves stretched impossibly high, filled with books that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The air itself hummed with knowledge, and Jake could feel the weight of centuries of wisdom pressing down on him from every direction. Princess Kira led him through the winding corridors of the library, past chambers where Zephyrian scholars studied texts that changed their words as they were read. Her skin had maintained a steady blue-green color since his success in the first trial, and Jake was beginning to understand that this meant she was experiencing something between hope and curiosity. "The trial of wisdom has broken more challengers than any other," she said as they walked. "Not because it requires vast knowledge or perfect logic, but because it demands something far more difficult, the ability to accept that some questions are more important than their answers." They stopped before a circular chamber whose walls were covered in mirrors that reflected not just images, but thoughts, memories, and possibilities. At the center of the room stood a single mirror that seemed to contain infinite reflections of itself, each one showing a different version of reality. "The paradox of the infinite mirror," Princess Kara explained. "For 1,000 years, the greatest minds in the galaxy have attempted to solve it. Ethereal philosophers who could calculate the movements of stars, Nexus computers that could process the thoughts of entire civilizations, even ancient beings whose intelligence spans multiple dimensions." Jake stepped closer to the mirror and immediately felt dizzy. Each reflection showed him a different version of himself, as a child, as an old man, as a being made of light, as a creature of shadow. The reflections went on forever, each one real and unreal at the same time. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked. "Solve the paradox," Princess Kara said simply. "Understand the nature of reflection and reality, of self and other, of knowledge and wisdom. Find the truth that lies at the heart of the infinite mirror." Jake stared at the mirror for what felt like hours. He saw versions of himself that had made different choices, lived different lives, become different people. He saw reflections of reflections, each one claiming to be the real Jake Morrison. The paradox was dizzying in its complexity. Other challengers had approached this puzzle with pure intellect, trying to logic their way through the infinite possibilities. They had failed because they were trying to solve something that was designed to be unsolvable through conventional means. Jake thought about his conversation with the princess, about her words regarding the true nature of the trials. She had said they were about understanding what she needed, about seeing beyond the obvious. What if the trial of wisdom wasn't about solving the paradox, but about understanding why it existed? "Princess," he said slowly, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course. When you look in this mirror, what do you see?" Princess Kara's skin shifted to a deeper blue, and Jake saw something vulnerable flicker across her face. "I see infinite versions of myself. The princess who rules with wisdom, the princess who rules with fear, the princess who never learns to trust, the princess who opens her heart only to have it broken. I see every choice I could make, every path I could take, every way I could fail or succeed. And which one is real? All of them. None of them. The mirror shows every possibility, but it cannot show which one I will choose to become." Jake nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. "The paradox isn't about the mirror all. It's about the person looking into it," explain. "The mirror reflects infinite possibilities, but it can't make choices. Only the person looking into it can decide which reflection to make real. The paradox exists because we're trying to find absolute truth in something that's designed to show us that truth is something we create, not something we discover. Princess Kara's skin began to glow with colors Jake had never seen before. Continue. Wisdom isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about understanding that the most important questions can only be answered by how we choose to live our lives. The mirror shows infinite possibilities, but the wise person understands that they have the power to choose which possibility becomes reality. Jake stepped closer to the mirror and placed his hand on its surface. Instead of trying to solve the paradox, he embraced it. I choose to be the Jake Morrison who tries to understand others, who represents his species with honor, who learns from his mistakes and grows from his experiences. Not because it's the right reflection, but because it's the one I want to make real. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and suddenly all the infinite reflections merged into one. Jake saw himself as he truly was, not perfect, not the greatest warrior or the smartest human, but someone who was willing to try, to learn, to grow. The paradox dissolved because he had stopped trying to solve it and started accepting it. The trial of wisdom is complete, Princess Kara announced, and Jake could hear the wonder in her voice. You have passed the second trial, but Jake barely heard her. He was thinking about what the trial had really tested. Not intelligence or knowledge, but the wisdom to understand that life was about making choices, not finding perfect answers. The princess had been looking for someone who could understand that ruling an empire wasn't about having all the answers, but about having the wisdom to make good choices. Even when the answers weren't clear, the third trial took place in the Chamber of Truth, a small room deep in the heart of the palace where Princess Kara herself would probe the depths of Jake's mind and heart. This was the trial that had broken the most challengers, not because it was physically or intellectually demanding, but because it required complete honesty about one's deepest fears and greatest failures. Jake sat in the center of the chamber while Princess Kara placed her hands on his temples. Her touch was gentle but firm, and Jake could feel her consciousness touching his own like a careful surgeon exploring a wound. The trial of heart begins now, she said softly. I will see your memories, your fears, your dreams, your failures. I will know who you truly are, beneath all the masks you wear for the world. Are you prepared for this? No, Jake said honestly, but I'm ready to try. The princess's consciousness flowed into his mind like water finding its way through cracks in stone. Jake felt her experiencing his memories, his childhood on Earth, his military training, his first contact with alien species, the friends he had lost, the mistakes he had made, the weight of responsibility he carried. She saw his fear of failure, his worry that he wasn't strong enough or smart enough to represent humanity properly. She saw his loneliness, his difficulty forming close relationships, his tendency to put duty before personal happiness. She saw every ugly, shameful, weak part of him that he tried to hide from the world, but she also saw something else. She saw his genuine care for others, his willingness to sacrifice for his friends, his determination to keep trying even when the odds were impossible. She saw that his failures had taught him compassion, that his fears had taught him humility, that his loneliness had taught him to value connection when it came. Most importantly, she saw that Jake had never tried to hide from his flaws or pretend they didn't exist. He had faced them, learned from them, and grown stronger because of them. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest about his imperfections. When the trial ended, Princess Kara removed her hands from his temples with tears streaming down her face. Her skin was cycling through colors so rapidly that Jake couldn't follow the changes. You have passed all 3 trials, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. You are the first being in 10 years to succeed. Jake felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. What happens now? Now we must have a conversation that I have never had with any other challenger, Princess Kara said. Because you are the first one who passed the trials without trying to win them. I don't understand. You succeeded because you were not trying to conquer the trials or claim me as a prize. You were trying to understand them, to understand me. You saw the challenges not as obstacles to overcome, but as opportunities to learn and grow. Jake nodded. Slowly, the trials were never about proving worthiness. They were about proving compatibility. Exactly. I was not looking for the strongest or the smartest or the most powerful challenger. I was looking for someone who could see me as a person, who could understand that ruling an empire requires partnership, not dominance. But I'm not here to court you, Your Highness. I'm here to represent humanity. Princess Kara smiled, and her skin settled into a warm gold that Jake was beginning to associate with genuine happiness. I know, and that is why you succeeded where others failed. You treated me as an equal, not as a prize to be won. So what happens now? Jake asked again. Now we begin the real work, she said. You have proven that humanity deserves respect in the galactic community. Your people have shown that they possess qualities that are rare and valuable: adaptability, empathy, and the wisdom to seek understanding rather than conquest. And you? I have learned that the trials were teaching me something as well as testing my suitors. They were teaching me that true strength comes not from standing alone, but from finding others who can stand beside you as equals. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had succeeded not just in the trials, but in proving that humanity had something